Hey, friends, glad that you are here. I want to talk with you about some lies. I'm Dr. Carol, and I've been thinking and writing and talking to a lot of people about this area for a while now. And I have seen some really big lies that people believe about sex and relationships and intimacy. And the very best lies have just enough truth to give them plausibility. They sound pretty good, and when those lies get embedded deep in your soul, it creates all kinds of problems. Now, I know that myself and the people I've talked with, you didn't wake up one day and decide, I'm going to believe a lie. That these are things that have just come into your understanding. They have seeped into your belief system, in some ways, probably without you even realizing it. And so it colors your ability to experience intimacy now. It colors how you go about relationships, especially the closest personal relationships. And I want to unpack a few of these lies about sex, relationships, and intimacy. The first lie is that sex isn't a big deal, that it's just a simple biological function. Well, it is true that sex is a biological function. We are embodied beings. God created us, body, mind, and soul. All those parts are interconnected. And our bodies have hormones, sex organs, feelings, good, bad, or ugly. Most people experience a sexual drive, some more, some less. It is a part of our physical makeup. And sexual behaviors have consequences. You know that. Some of those consequences can be good, some of them can be anything but good. But here's the thing, if sex were only a biological function, it wouldn't have the weight that it does. If you just kind of step back for a minute and think, if sex were just about bodies, then why would the shame and pain and desire and all of those other matters of the heart become so big when we think or talk or do things in the sexual arena? So the truth is, it's sex is not just a simple biological function. It's about matters of the heart. The matters of the heart are just and many times even more important than just the biological function. Lie number two, this is something that has crept into certain Christian spaces, religious messages, and that is that sex is dirty and shameful. God hates sex. Well, that isn't true either. Look at what we know in Scripture. The very first command God gave to human beings was essentially have a lot of sex. That's what's implied in Genesis when it says, be fruitful and multiply. And yes, sex is not only about procreation, but the point is, God saw it as good. There's only one book of the Bible that is devoted to a single subject. All the 66 books in the Bible talk about all kinds of things except one. The Song of Solomon talks about sex, and it's very explicit, very erotic, and it's unadulterated goodness. The Bible does not shy away from talking about bad sex. There's all kinds of bad stuff in Scripture about sex, but this core book, Song of Solomon, sex is portrayed between a husband and wife as unadulterated goodness. So the messages that many in the Christian church have gotten, that sex is bad and God doesn't like sex, even if your logical brain doesn't believe that, your emotions, your right brain, the heart part of you, often struggles with that understanding. And it's not true. The truth is that the kingdom of darkness, Satan, took what God intended to be good and wrapped it in all kinds of junk. It distorted what God intended to be good. Intimacy gone wrong. We've only alluded to the difference between intimacy and sex. They are not the same. God intended them to be connected in marriage, but just two bodies coming together and exchanging fluids doesn't lead to intimacy. Intimacy means seeing and being seen, knowing and being known. And for that to happen, the coverings have to come off, not only bodies, but minds and hearts and souls as well. And you can do that with or without sex. The truth is, God created sex as something very good, as connected with in marriage, but not identical to intimacy. And the devil messed all that up. Lie number 3 is one that I've seen so often among good God-following people, and that is that the goal of the Christian life is to have a happy, sexually satisfying marriage and family. Walk into most churches on a weekend service. Don't so much listen to the words that are said, but just look around and experience it. Who is church for? Well, the classic evangelical, contemporary Western Christian church would make you think it's for families, married people with children. Well, what about the 50% that aren't married? Over 50% of adults are not married in the United States and many Western countries now. What about them? In the last couple hundred years, I believe the Christian church, by and large, has done a woefully inadequate job at helping unmarried people contend with their need for intimacy on one hand, and how do they handle their sex drive if they're not married on the other hand, and all of that. Your need for intimacy is there regardless of relationship status, but sex is important too. How do you handle all of that? The goal of the Christian life is to become like Jesus. That's the truth. And both the single Christian life and the married Christian life are both hard, and they can both be good. So the classic Christian picture today, that it's primarily for marriage and families, well, no. It's just as much for unmarried people. And when you make marriage the goal, there's a lot of other junk that, doesn't go well. The fourth lie is so prevalent that most people don't even realize they've come to believe it. And that is the belief, the lie, that to be a fully alive, whole, fulfilled human being, you have to have a happy, satisfying sex life. Well, sex is important, but you do not have to have sex to live. You do not have to have sex to be a whole and fully alive human being. I know there are some people that, some I've talked with, who would push back on that, but hear me for a second. Jesus, the most fully alive human being ever to walk this earth, never had sex, never was married. Would he have been more alive, more fulfilled if he had had sex or got married? No. This is a distortion that culture has promulgated in, maybe the last, 50, 100, 150 years. And the Western Christian church has Christianized that belief by therefore saying, therefore you must get married. We talked about that a minute ago in the third lie. But this lie is so deep that we are not adequately addressing what happens when you're married and your married sex life isn't going well, or what happens if you're not married and you are wanting to follow Jesus, which means no sexual behaviors. What then? Can you be happy and satisfied and fulfilled that way too? Well, Jesus and many others would say yes. Paul traveled the Middle East proclaiming the good news of Jesus, and he didn't have a wife. Most of the disciples of Jesus, we don't know their marital status. We know Peter had a wife because he had a mother-in-law, but most of the rest of the disciples, we don't know. I think that would say that marital status isn't what's most important. It is important. Your relationship status is important. God cares about marriage and families, and It is not the most important. You can learn to address these matters of the heart, especially around intimacy, regardless of your relationship status. Now, those four big lies can be kind of challenging to process and work through, but it can happen. I know I've had to work through some of that in my own understanding. And as I have done that and talked with other people who have similarly wrestled through, the latest project that I have completed is the book Sexpectations: Reframing Your Good and Not So Good Stories About God, Love, and Relationships. If you are watching this live right now or very soon after I do this, this book comes out next week on February 13. My book baby comes into the world. And we are going to celebrate with a party, and you are invited. Join me here on my Dr. Carol Ministries channel at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. If you're in another time zone, you can figure it out, for a virtual online book release party. We're going to have giveaways. What would be a party without giveaways? So yeah, we'll be doing some giveaways. I'll be answering questions. If you have a question you'd like me to answer in that live show, feel free to comment under this video or come over to drcarolministries.com and leave me a message there. I'll also, of course, be watching the chat during that live book party. We'll have a few stories. I'll be sharing some fun and perhaps a couple sobering facts about Christians and sex and relationships. Have a couple brief stories from the book and readings and so on. So I would invite you to come join the fun Tuesday evening, February 13th, for our virtual online book release party of Sexpectations. You can find out a lot more about the book right now at yoursexpectations.com. Yoursexpectations.com. Those links are also under this video. Well, thank you for joining me here. I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to leave a comment. I read every one. I would also be happy to see you over on our website, drcarolministries.com, and you can use the contact page there to leave me a confidential message. And I'll look forward to seeing you on February 13th that evening.